So you've asked me to talk to you today and ask some questions because we're
Yep.
both pastors' kids, and
Yes.
I came to it a bit late, but my parents were always in ministry and always very involved in the church, even before Dad became a pastor. So we've got a bit of bit of common
We're
ground
nearly
there.
twins, aren't we?
So how's being a pastor's kid influenced your life? Like, how's that shaped you and moulded you?
Okay. I think growing up with parents that led a church was, for me, was really hard. I really didn't like the fact that my parents pastored a church. I was embarrassed by it. But because of the way they lived their life, it's actually become something that really was profoundly helpful to me in life, and it has actually given me a love for God's church, the people in God's church, and it's been very helpful in what we do now, having that background. Yeah.
So in the life of church, things go very well and sometimes they can go very poorly.
Yes.
What's the best thing that you've seen in church?
I think having a safe place for our kids to grow up in. Here in Bairnsdale, when we were part of the church here and our kids were teenagers, those years, the formative kids years, was very powerful. It gave them such a healthy place of acceptance, belonging, meaning and purpose to life in a way. And it also gave us great friendships with people. I think it's the relationships with people that is the key to the power of church. Yeah.
So sometimes things can go pretty poorly as well.
Yes.
What do you think is the worst thing that you've experienced through church or seen happen?
Okay, if you took away the exact examples, I think fundamentally when things go wrong in church life and people get hurt, people get damaged, get walked over, leadership's always the answer and leadership's always the problem. And if you have a leader that is insecure but feels they've got to lead with this strong push forward and they will almost walk over people because I think the goal is so noble, but they walk over people, or because of their insecurity, they make decisions based out of that, and that can be very damaging to people. And I think that's when things go wrong, is when we have leaders that haven't allowed God to refine those things in their life, because we all have stuff. We all arrive with baggage.
Yeah.
And so it's the decisions, the reactions, those sorts of things that are done out of broken people that I think cause the damage.
I think the irony is that we go to church because we're sinners, but then sometimes we can't handle the sin that's in church.
Yes.
It's,
Well,
yeah.
a healthy church is full of a whole variety of people in all sorts of different places in their life. And the power of church is putting all those people together and we don't kill each other. That's God's dream was, let's stick all these broken people together and let's just show the world what can happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So in light of that, how's that formed your view of what church should be?
I think we've somehow missed it in our Western churches. We've created churches that we've thought somehow is more like a university than a hospital. And I think that if we can restore people to health, no matter what that means, no matter what has happened in their life, if we can create an environment where people heal and come to wholeness, that's a very, very powerful thing. So I think behind everything we do with Red Gum is that desire to see people really come through to wholeness in every area of their life, whether that's marriage, finances, relationships outside of marriage, just anything. Yeah.
So stepping back just slightly.
Yes.
So with all of that, all the best and the worst, you probably saw some of that back in your formative years as well.
Yes.
When did you decide, separate to your parents, to choose church? What made
As
you...
a direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you when did you decide that you were going to make church a priority for your life, separate to
I
your
tried to
parents?
get out of church for a long time, but when I was 16, I came into this genuine relationship with Jesus, and that changed my embarrassment. In fact, in an art class at school, once I discovered who Jesus really was and asked him to come into my world, and I wanted to follow his way of doing life, gone was the embarrassment, and I actually did a painting of Jesus on the cross, which if someone asked me what my dad did, I would never tell them. I hated that he was a minister, and yet here I did this painting in an art class, and so something changed dramatically in me when Jesus really came into my life. And so that changed the direction of my life. And then in my early 20s, we began leading youth. And that's been most of my focus. Now I get to play with adults, but most of my life has been with young people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So now a few years on,
Yes.
where did the passion for Red Gum come from?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a love for people. I think fundamentally, there's a verse in Isaiah 49, and it's the heart of God being represented in this verse, and he says that those who have compassion on them would lead them. And I think I genuinely love people. I genuinely see the best in people. I'm digging for gold. I'm not looking for stones. And so I think the passion for Red Gum is behind that is a heart for people, and behind that is God's heart for me. So I didn't just wake up one morning and like people, because people can be not always nice. But as I've experienced God's love for me, I've found a love for people. But that love for people drives me to see something better for them, because it really breaks my heart when I see people struggling, when I see people that are far from God and they're living in their own strength, in their own ways, and it's just not working, but they don't know in a better way. And so that's what's behind what we do. Yeah.
So there's broken people everywhere.
Yes.
Why Red Gum? Why Bairnsdale? Why Skipsland?
Yeah, well, when we left Bairnsdale to go to Sydney, that was like 18 years ago. We spent 16 years in Sydney. I never knew if we'd ever come back here. We still kept the farm out of town as like just an optional extra in the background somewhere, but I never knew where home was for 16 years. And yet, when we came back for Dad's funeral and I was heading back to Sydney, and I said to Coral, I want to be buried in Bairnsdale Cemetery. I wasn't in a rush, like it didn't have to happen straight away.
Not straight away.
Not straight away, right? But I'm thinking, when I die, I want to be buried in Bairnsdale Cemetery. And it suddenly hit me. I knew where home was. If you want to know where you want to be buried, that's home. I didn't know that was setting me up to come back to Bairnsdale. And yet there was a moment in time, there was a phone call actually that involved your dad. And my brother Jeff rang me, but before the phone call, I'd said to our leadership team in the church we'd planted in Sydney, I just know something's changing. I don't know what it is, but we're heading for a different season, and I couldn't explain it. And then we'd been pastoring this church for about 9 years that we'd started from scratch, and we loved the people, great people, beautiful people, and that all, we had this one heart and one unity. It was a really healthy place. And then I got a phone call from my brother Jeff saying that your dad was no longer the pastor of the church here in Bairnsdale, and in unfortunate circumstances how it came about. And I know many people got hurt, not just your dad, but many people. And I just knew in that instant that we'd have come back to Bairnsdale and plant a church. Yep.
So what do you envision for Red Gum in the coming years? How's this going to play out? How are we going to heal the broken here?
I think no matter what you do in the life of a church, no matter how technically smart, how creative your worship team is, how well or how badly we do anything, if people walk in to one of our environments, say it's a Sunday or a home group or a growing to maturity, whatever it is, if they don't feel loved, we've failed. Doesn't matter what else we've done right. I think at the bottom of everything we do, people have got to feel loved, not just be told, but actually experience it. And that will be different for every person. And the truth is that I can't do that. It actually takes a whole church to do that. It takes broken people to love broken people. And that's impossible without Jesus being who he said he is and having an impact on our world today. That he actually came back to life, that he isn't a dead God that we somehow believe some theory about, but actually we have this encounter with God that changes us. It's changed me, totally changed me. I could be a selfish little mongrel, I tell you, very easily, very easily.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are the strengths of Red Gum that you see? How that's currently where we're situated?
I love the rawness. I love that people have a freedom to be honest and real, but that in itself is not enough. You actually need life transformation. You can be real, but that's discouraging. You know, if we're just all miserable, but actually seeing lives changed, that's just brilliant. And I think that's what certainly motivates me, seeing people's stories and their lives changing. Yeah.
So back to the pastor's kids.
Yes.
What would you say to your teenage daughters now?
Yes.
What advice would you give to the pastor's kids that are growing up now?
I think my girls actually know that we grew up under a generational blessing, that they experienced that. They saw that in my parents. Because my mum and dad lived behind closed doors the same as they lived in front of people. They lived their life for people. They were absolutely authentic. Like, I never heard my mum and dad ever argue. Never raised their voices at each other, ever, ever, ever. Now, Dad was a strong, task-focused, quick-tempered person. I'm not saying they didn't disagree behind closed doors, but in front of us, I have no memory of them ever. And so I grew up with the security that Mum and Dad will be together forever. I know my girls grew up with that. Mum and Dad will be together forever. That is a very wonderful thing to give your kids. It helps to set them up. And I know that our girls actually both really appreciate the homes that they've grown up in. Did we blow it as parents? Well, Coral mightn't have. I certainly did it sometimes, certainly did, yeah. But I've since had the opportunity at a national conference once. I got to speak to all the pastors' kids that managed to get out of the big meetings and hide with all the other young people. And I think if someone is growing up with parents that are really sold out to Jesus, in whatever form that looks like, that's something that at some point in their life they'll appreciate, like really appreciate. You might struggle with some of the ways your parents do things, but ultimately that becomes a wonderful thing in your life. Has that been your experience?
Well, Dad became a pastor when I was
older.
In my late 20s. So, that was a bit different for me, just having people know me who I wasn't exactly sure who they were, but they knew me because they knew Dad.
Yes.
It's a different kind of pressure that you're put under, even when I was older, and was pretty secure in who I was and my relationship with God. So, yeah, it's a different dynamic for sure, and I can't imagine being a teenager and trying to work through that dynamic. But yeah, it's that's why I was asking, when you chose the church and when that became your direction for you personally, not just your parents and being dragged along with your parents.
I had real problems with people in church life saying to me things like, you shouldn't do that, you're a preacher's kid. So I'd do the opposite. I'd try to be worse. But then that actually proved that they were putting me, I didn't want to be put in a box, and yet I put myself in a little box of responsiveness. And that didn't work real well. And I know I put my mum and dad through a lot of pain, put myself through a lot of pain. But I think what changed was not so much church, but my relationship with God. That fundamentally was a change. And there's a lot of things I didn't like about church, and the fact that it took my dad in particular away from where I'd like him to be with me, and meetings and things like that. But now, looking back, even my grandfather on mum's side of the family was a Methodist minister, so now looking back, I can actually see the benefits of that. But at the time, I didn't.
So any final words for those watching, I suppose, for those that are broken or those that are healed? How can we best help those around us or seek help if we need it?
I would love you, if you've never taken a step towards Redgum and you're in this community, like geographically here, I just love you to get involved in some way. Just take a little baby step. And if you're in another state or another part of the world, just stay connected to us. We're on a journey in a sense, like all of us together, and we want you to be part of that. We don't want you to feel isolated. We want you to experience change in things that are bigger than what you can handle, things that you can't change. I know God can, and He does it through people. He works through communities. He works through connections with people like Kathy in Malta. I just love the fact that you're watching, and I know there's a hunger within you to grab hold of these things, and what's coming out of this little Aussie church is having an influence in your life, encouraging you. And we want to do things really practical. The series we've just done on how to make better decisions and live with fewer regrets, it's as practical as we can try and make it. And there's a new series we're about to begin, and it's just going to go for 3 weeks, 3 Sundays in a row. And I'd encourage you, don't miss that. Next week, we've got Glennis from Chaplaincy Australia, and that may not be live recorded we're probably still going to be having to deal with.
Likely we won't be allowed back, but.
So we won't be gathering together for a little bit, I wouldn't think, but we will certainly be. So stay connected to us online and let us know, like ask us questions, send in an email of questions or a text message, like communicate with us in some way. We'll certainly do our best to communicate back.
Yeah, we're definitely available on all the social media channels and all of that. So pick a method and send us your questions.
Yes. Yeah.
And let us know where you are.
But just let you know that our heart is for you, like really for you. And that doesn't mean we won't let you down. It's not because we mean to, but just because we will. There'll be times when like Theo, my dear mate, Theo, like I forgot his birthday till the next day last week, but Theo forgives me. Yeah. He's a good guy. He actually texted me about 1 o'clock this morning wishing me happy birthday, and I texted him back saying, what are you doing awake?
He's just trying to make sure that you know that he knows.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, well, thank you for answering our questions.
No really hard ones there, Lauren.
Well, we can do that in part 2 maybe.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you for that, Lauren.
Thank you.
Yeah.